Talmud Aleph, 38a at the Mishnah. Yesterday in the Mishnah we saw, so we're at 38a at the Mishnah, and yesterday we saw the Mishnah on 37, which had a list of people who had done upgrades to the Beis HaMikdash and were blessed on account of it. And then we're going to have a list of some people who are remembered for some things that they did not help with the Beis HaMikdash, and some of them will be redeemed in, will find redemption for their actions, a lack of actions in the Gemara. Ve'elu lignai, and here's a list of people that are lignai, not for a blessing but for shame. Shel beis garmu, the household of garmu. They would not teach anybody how to make the lechem hapanim, the showbread. Shel beis avtinas, the household of avtinas, would not teach anybody about how to make the incense, the ktoris. So two groups of Kohanim, two families of the Kohanim that knew how to make things for the Beis HaMikdash and wouldn't teach anybody. Hugras ben Levi Yudea Perek Bashir v'Leirotza Lalami. Hugras ben Levi knew the certain way of playing music and singing and wouldn't teach anybody. Ben Kamtzar Leirotza Lalami Amasek South. Ben Kamtzar would not teach about writing. The Gemara is going to tell us what it was able to do in his writing that he wouldn't teach anybody. Ala Rishonim, on the first group, people that did righteous things to help, Ne'emar, the verse says, Zecher Tzaddik Livracha. The remembrance of a righteous person is for a blessing. Ba'al Elu Ne'emar, about these it says, V'shem Rishoim Yirkav, in the name of Rishoim rots. So the Gemara is going to explain that. Turn on. So the Brisa taught. Beis Garmu knew how to make the showbread, which was a particular bread that had to be a thick bread, one tefach thick. It had to be not allowed to become leavened, so it was not it couldn't be chametz. It had to be matzah, and it had to have sides as well. And so it was a particular shape and a particular way to bake it, and it had to stay fresh, and it had to not fall apart and crumble. So they know how to do it. And they didn't want to teach anybody. So the Chachamim sent to bring smiths from Alexandria in Mitzrayim. And Alexandria had an enormous Jewish community, and in fact, when there was a fight amongst the earlier on in the second Beis HaMikdash, when there was a fight amongst the two children of the Kohen Gadol. Chanyod, the elder son, ran away and ran to Alexander Mitzrayim, feeling that he had the right to be Kohen Gadol. He built a Beis HaMikdash replica and made a Beis HaMikdash out in Alexandria. And so they had smiths, they had experts there that could do certain things that the Beis HaMikdash needed. So they brought them to Eretz Yisrael. They knew how to bake, like the family of Beis Garmu, but they didn't know how to get it. They can bake it, but they don't know how to get it out of the pans, off the oven walls, in order to keep it whole and still keep it whole. Because these would bake them on the outside and heat the oven from the outside. And these would do it on the inside. The Egyptians, the Alexandrians, their breads would mold. And the Beis HaMikdash would not mold. Now, even though we saw earlier that was a part of the miracles that happened in the Beis HaMikdash, but in some holidays, we talked about this before, you don't rely on miracles. You have to do things you have to know what you're doing, and they did not know what they were doing. And when the Chachamim heard about this, that they're trying to get it reestablished, but to teach it from the Alexandrians, and it didn't work. Amru, they said, all that Hashem created for His own glory and honor. Everything called in my name, and for my honor, I created it. So Chazru Beis Garmu becoming they brought back the family of Garmu to their place to be the ones to make the showbread the lechem hacham. Shalchu lehem chachamim. So the chachamim. Shalchu lehem chachamim. So the chachamim sent to them v'leibo, and they refused to come. Right? They had been replaced, and now the chachamim wanted them back in their job, and say, "Call them, come, let's join and come back to the Beis Hamikdash job." They didn't come. Couple lehem skarim and both. They double offered them when they offered them double their wages. They came. At first they were getting 12 coins per day. Now they were getting 24. Rabbi Yehuda says no, they were always getting 24. They got 48. The Chachamim said to Mari, why is it that you won't teach others how to do it? So they said, we're doing this for a righteous reason. Our ancestors, our fathers knew that this house, this Beis Hamikdash, ultimately will be destroyed. Perhaps someone who's not righteous will learn how to make this showbread. And they will go and do it for the idols as a part of idolatry. Because if not, we trust ourselves. But if we teach it to others, we don't know where this information is going to end up. And it may end up in a house of idol worship. And we have one thing that we mention them for praise. In the household of Beis Garmu, they never ate. They never made in their own houses. They never made fine bread. It was always coarse bread. They never made a bread made of fine flour. In order that no one ever accused them of having used recipes from the showbread, from the lechem hapanim. So in order to make sure they were never accused of misusing the Beis Hamikdash and the information they had, and to show that the information was strictly for the Beis Hamikdash, they themselves never used in their own houses. They never used fine flour. Always had a coarse bread in order to keep their reputation clean, so that no one ever accused them of doing anything wrong. The Kaimash and Emar, and this fulfills the Torah verse that it says, and you will be clean from Hashem and from Yisrael. And we say that means that it's not enough to say, you know what, Hashem knows I'm doing righteous. If everybody else thinks I'm wrong, so be it. Now, sometimes you have to have that strength to say, look, I'm doing the right thing, even if people don't understand. But you have to try and make it look like that not only Hashem knows that you're doing righteous, but that other people also see and understand that what you're doing. And so they, in order to make sure that no one accused them of misuse of the information they had from the Beis Hamikdash, none of them, the descendants, would eat any clean bread if they made it in their own house. Somebody else made it fine, but in their own house, they would not eat they would not make fine flour bread. So that's the household of Beis Garmu. So once the Mishnah had said that Beis Garmu was remembered for shame, here the Gemara says, well, actually, they meant it well, and they're not for shame. Shal Beis Avtinas le'rotz olam and amasek teres. The household of Avtinas would not teach about the ketoras, how to make the incense. Similar brisa. The household of Avtinas, they were well versed in making the incense nectaris. They didn't want to teach them. So the Chachamim went ahead and sent for smiths, for spice makers from Alexandria. They knew how to infuse the spices and to mix them. But they didn't know how to include a spice that would help the smoke go directly up and to have a strong upright pillar of smoke. Shalalalu metame the family of Besaptinas, theirs would go up straight, kamaka like a stick. Shalalalu maftzil lekanakat. However, the Alexandrians, it would just the smoke would just come from all over the place. It was and it didn't have a structure. Chachamim heard about this. Everything Hashem created was for His honor, and so, well, this is what they know. All that Hashem does is for His sake. Different verse that we said before. There's a lot to learn about that. And they returned. They brought back the children of Beis Avtinas to their place. So they wanted to. The Chachamim first tried calling them and saying, all right, you got your job back, come back. They wouldn't come. They had to double the price for them. And then they came. Every day they would take 12. Now, now they would take 24. Usually they used to take 24, and now they took 48. So again, the Chachamim asked them, why would you not teach others? Mara'isem, what do you see? Not to teach others how to do this. Amru, they said, our fathers, our household, our ancestors knew this house, the Beis Hamikdash, is going to be destroyed. Amru Shema Yilmei Adam Sheina Mugan, and they said, therefore, perhaps somebody that's not appropriate is going to learn the methods of making these spices, and go and make these spices for idolatry, and therefore we didn't teach anybody. The kach, this way, they'll do it this way. And this is something that we remember them for praise. You know what they did, similar to the previous story. Even a bride wouldn't go out with a perfume on from the household of Beis Avtinas. When they married a woman from outside the family, they made a condition with the bride. You want to join our family, that's fine, but you have to agree to this, not to wear perfume outside of the house. So that people not say, now, oh, look at this. They're using their Ketoris recipes, their incense recipes, a spice recipe from the Beis Hamikdash to make a nice perfume. And so they were not allowed to do that.
We've seen this a number of times.
We saw this in Chicago. Yeah.
So it's a stipulation that they just don't wear perfume for the day of the wedding or in general?
Never. So that no one ever say, look at that. They're using their Beis Hamikdash knowledge to make themselves a nice perfume. So they had to agree to not walk out with perfume. So no one else would make that position. Inside the house, fine. With their family, fine, because that's people knew that you weren't doing that because you weren't using Beis Hamikdash spice because it was all in the family. But to make sure no one else does it, they never went out with the spice with the perfume. The Kaima Shanamar, to fulfill this obligation, you should be clean from Hashem Yisrael, meaning it's not enough to see yourself as a doing something right, and not enough to know that Hashem knows you're doing something right, but even but more so that even people are being you see people as people will see you as righteous. Tanya. So the Brisa taught Amar Rabbi Shmuel Pamachas Ayisi Ma'al Madera. Rabbi Shmuel said, I was once traveling, and I found one of the descendants of Beis Avtinas, of Martila. And I said to him, Abusecha Bikshu Laharbais Bechvedo. Your ancestors, they were way too concerned with their own honor. And were willing to diminish the honor of the Beis Hamikdash, of Hashem, to keep the pride of this is our family's tradition. We know the recipe for this. You're more interested in your own family glory than in the Beis Hamikdash. And as a result, Achshav now, the honor of Hashem never is diminished. Doesn't make a difference if the Beis Hamikdash is standing or not. However, but your ancestors, your family, no honor left to it because the Beis Hamikdash service is lost and your family's work is lost. So they wanted to maintain, the glory, the honor, we're the only ones who know how to do this. And as a result, they have none of it. But the glory of Hashem, which they could have maintained and sustained, is lost. Is still there because Hashem, regardless of what you do for him, Hashem's glory is still. That's what happens. So he chastised them. Amar Rabbi Kiva said, Sachli Rabbi Shmuel ben Luga. Rabbi Shmuel ben Luga told me a story. Once I and one of the descendants of Beis Avtinas went out to a field of out into a field to get some spices, grasses, etc. And I saw my friend, he cried and he laughed. I said to him, why did you cry? I remembered the honor that my ancestors had in the Beis Hamikdash that they could make the incense spices. He says, yeah, that's something to cry about, that you don't have it. And why did you then smile or laugh afterwards? Amar Li said to me, because I remember that Hashem will bring it back to us in a future time. We will get to do this again. He says, yeah, that is comforting. But what made you remember this? Amar Li, he said to me, because I saw in the grass, the spice that would be used to make the smoke in the incense go upward. And this is called Mala Ashan. They would call it the rising smoke, or what makes the smoke rise. And I saw it. So I knowing that spice, it reminded me of what it was, and that I should, and I remembered the glory we once had and the loss of that. And then the hope of it getting back, it made me happy. So Rabbi Shmuel ben Luga said to him, show it to me. Show me that spice. Amar Li, he said to me, we are sworn to secrecy. That we would never show it to anybody. Amar Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri further said a story. I met an elderly person, and he had a scroll with a list of spices and directions for spices. I said to him, where are you from? He said, I'm an elder, one of the old people from the house of Avtinas, who knew how to make the spices in the Beis Hamikdash. He says, and what is this scroll in your head? It's a scroll full of spices and the recipes for the Iktaras. Show it to me, please. He said to me, because when my father's household were still strong, and they were people that were sinuim. They were modest people who would keep a secret well. We wouldn't give it to anybody, and I wouldn't show anybody the spices. Now, unfortunately, the descendants of Tinas have not held to their standards, and there are people out there that are not great from our family, Arei Lecha, I'm giving it to you, Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri, and Hizarba, be careful with it to keep it correctly and righteously. When I came, I told Rabbi Akiva the story. One of the elders of the household of Avtinas, realizing that not all of the family members were upright anymore, decided to give it to the Chachamim rather than his descendants. Amar li said to me, so we can no longer speak about the ills of this family as if they did something wrong. We could see clearly, retroactively, that what they did was for the glory of Hashem. And now that glory is not there in their family anymore, they're handing it over to the Chachamim. So you see, it was always meant for good. Mikan Omar ben Azai. Upon that, Ben Azai said, wow, from here we learn something amazing. V'shimcha yikra'ucha u'b'mkemcha yeshivucha. This is it's an axiom, a statement to remember, to live by. They will call you names, and they will put you in your place. People feel like they understand and they're going to put you in new for you. But as long as you're doing Mishal Chayit Nulacha, and what they're giving you is really yours from Shemayim. In other words, as long as you're doing the right thing, even if the people say about you, oh, this is the wrong thing to do, it's terrible, what are you doing? So if it's a righteous thing, it'll come back to give you, to be your source of gift. No one can take away from that which is appropriated and set for each person. So the base of Tinas, they held by theirs, even if the Chachamim said, this is wrong, and called them out. Ultimately, their righteousness was seen generations later. And similarly, a malchus nagaz b'chaverta afil. One kingdom cannot take away from another kingdom, even one hairbreadth. In other words, that whatever is appropriate for you will come at your time, and nobody can take it away from you, and you won't get it as a moment earlier, even if you make great efforts, push yourself ahead. Ultimately, it's going to, what's appropriate will come to you in the right way. This is a lesson in Emunah, in faith, and bitachon, that do your thing, do it right, do it l'shem shamayim, do it for the sake of heaven, and ultimately the good will come, even if sometimes there are those that seem to be a stumbling block to it. Don't fight it. No one can take away that which is yours, and you will not be able to get to attain that which you could attain any quicker on account of trampling on others. Next, it said Ahugras ben Levi knew how to sing. Tanya Kashu Noisin Kollel ben Ima, when he would sing nicely, Machnes Kollel Tachtiv, he can also put his thumb to his mouth, and put his finger by his nostrils. And he can whistle, where the kahana would get a headache on account of his call. So the Brisa teaches that what the Mishnah said, that Bakamser would not teach about writing. Amrolov, it was said about him, he could take 4 quills between his hand. So we have 5 fingers, which means that there are 4 gaps, 4 slots between the fingers. So you can take a quill in each one of the gaps. And can write a single word of 4 letters at once. You can write Hashem's name, the 4-letter name of Hashem, with one all at once, and each quill writing one of the 4 letters. So, but he wouldn't teach anybody how to do that. Amalei ma ra'is shalei lalami. Why wouldn't he teach anybody? Kulan matzuchuva l'davrei. The others all said they had a reason because these were services of the Beis Hamikdash, and they were afraid that it would be taken and used by someone in idolatry, so they didn't want to teach it. So they had a good reason, but he had no reason. Ben Kamsel lematzi tshuva l'davrei, and therefore al rishonim nem zechat tzadik devracha. So even though in our Mishnah we first said that all these families were of shame, we understand now that they did it for the sake of having l'shem shemayim, and it was not for shame. So we say zechat tzadik devracha. The remembrance of a righteous person is a blessing. Val Kamsa v'chaveirov and Val Kamsa and his fellows nema v'shem Rishon Yirkov, the name of the evil Ra. My v'shem Rishon Yirkov. What does that mean? Amar Rabbi Lazar says Ribus Tala v'shmoisan v'lamaskim v'shmayim. Ra comes up on their name. We don't mention their name. Rashi says no one should call anyone by their name. A person who did ill should not be named. No one should be named for that person. This is over here deals with the name of one of the judges in that are mentioned in the Gemara, the Shnei Dayanim Xeris, the two judges who made enactments, and one of them was Hanan ben Avshalom. Avshalom is the son of David, who rebelled against him and ultimately did wrong. So why would somebody name his child Avshalom? So this says in the name of Rabbi Tam that over there the correct text is Avi Shalom, which is a different name, also mentioned in Tanakh, and that's the name. But you would not name Avshalom because that is a name of someone who did ill, who did wrong. So that's the meaning that we don't want to perpetuate the name. The Gemara tells us a story about that. Masa Ravina asked a question. Masa ben Doeg ben Yosef. We have someone named Doeg, the son of Yosef. Doeg ben Yosef. Doeg was a person that did very bad at the time of David. Hamelech Doeg Adomi. He had. He ratted out David and had a city destroyed. Doeg was not a great person. So why would we have Yosef, Doeg, ben Yosef, Doeg, he was named Doeg. Shenichav ben Kata le'ima. His father died young and left him as a young orphan to his mother. And every day his mother would measure him. When and his mother would donate every day as he grew the amount of weight that he gained. The length that he gained, she would donate that much gold to the Beis Hamikdash. So very wealthy, and wanted him to grow and wanted every bit of his growth to be donated to the Beis Hamikdash. So it was tremendous. However, when the Romans destroyed the Beis Hamikdash and besieged the city, and people were starving, and in the end, she went crazy. She slaughtered her own son that she had been so proudly measuring every day and donating for his growth to be dedicated to the Mikdash. She killed him and ate him. But Leah, Kaina Yirmiyahu, and about her, Yirmiyahu said this, the Kina, Imtechalna Nashim Piriam Olale Tapuchim. If women can eat their own fruit, their youth that they were measuring, that they were making grow up. Meshiva Ruach HaKodesh, to which the Holy Spirit, the Ruach HaKodesh responded, V'ameres, and it says, Im Yaharig B'mikdash Hashem Kohen V'Navi. Yeah, if in the Beis Hamikdash of Hashem you can kill a Kohen and a Navi. So in any case, that's the story. But the end of the question is, how could we have someone named Doeg? Gemara says, yeah, it's not a good name to give, and in fact, look what happened to this kid. Right? It didn't end up well for him. So don't name for a Russian. So Gemara says, Chazim Ma'isalik Be. indeed see what ended up happening with him, it's not a good idea to name for a Russia. Amar Elazar. Rabbi Elazar said, "Tzadik me'atzmai v'Rasha mechaveira." A tzaddik is remembered for his goodness on account of his own actions, but a Rasha is remembered not only by his own actions, but those by the group of people that he associated with. Tzaddik mi'atzmai d'chsev zecha tzaddik bracha. It says the remembrance of a tzaddik is for blessing, single zecher. And by Rasha it says v'Rasha mechaveira from plural d'chsev v'shem rishaim. The name of the evildoers is Rats. Amalei Rabina Lahu Mirabana. The Amnasada Agata Kameh. It was a Chacham who was teaching Agata in front of Rabina. So he asked him a question. Where do we see this thing that the Chachamim teach, Zecha Tzadik L'Bracha? That the remembrance of a tzaddik is for blessing. He said, what are you talking about? Where do we see it from? It's a pasuk. It's a pasuk in Mishlei. Amalei Daksiv Zecha Tzadik Bracha, because it says so in Mishlei, in Proverbs. Yeah, what I mean to ask is, where do you find a hint to it in the Chumash itself, in the Torah? It says, Vashem Amar Amachas Amenim Avram. Hashem says, can I not tell Avram what I'm about to do with Sodom? And once Hashem mentions Avram, it says, Va'avram, and Avram, Avram is going to be a great nation and in strength. And he's So we see that once he mentioned Avram, he mentioned his righteousness, his greatness. Where do we know that the name of Rishaim, of the evildoers, rots? Again, he said that because it says that in a verse. No. What I mean to ask is, where do we find a hint of that in the Torah? It says, Vayehal ad Sadoim, and it says, and Lot, choosing to separate from Abram, pitched his tents all the way up to Sodom. Now we mentioned Sodom, it says, and the people of Sodom were very exceedingly evil to Hashem. So you see again, once you mention the Rishaim, you mentioned their rock. Amar Rabbi Lazar, Tzadik Darvin Shtei Rishaim Rabbi Lazar said we find a righteous person living amongst two evildoers and not learning to do evil. And Rasha Darvin Shtei Tzadikim Maseiv, and a Rasha living amongst two tzaddikim and didn't learn how to do good. Where is that? Tzadik Darvin Shtei Rishaim Maseiv Ovadia. That's Ovadia. Ovadia was a prophet, was a righteous person, but he was a servant of Achav and Izebel, right? Two evildoers, and then learn from them. And where do you have an evil person living amongst two righteous people not learning? Esa. That's Esa. Lived with Rivka and Yitzchak and didn't learn from them. Rabbi Lezer says, from the blessing of the righteous, you also learn the destruction or the curse that is evildoers. And vice versa as well. From the brach of tzaddikim, you see that immediately the Torah teaches the evils of the Rasha. The Sefer it says, Ki Yadativ. You know why I have a relationship with Hashem, with Avram? Hashem says, Ki Yadativ. I have a relationship with him. I know him. Laman Asher Yitzav Es Banav Es Beisei Achara. Because he's going to teach his children after him to guard the ways of Hashem, to do righteousness and justice. Uksiv Basrei, and immediately after that it says, Vayom Hashem Zakas Adem Amar Kirabah. Oh, the cries of the evil coming up from Sodom is too great. And from the evils of the Rishaim, you see the blessing of Tzadikim. The people of Sodom are so evil, terribly, exceedingly evil to Hashem. And then it says, Then it says after that, Hashem says to Avram, after Lot separated from him, that a blessing that he's going to have descendants. And so again, the destruction, the evil of the destruction of the evil, the bad of the evil, and the good that comes from those that are righteous. Rabbi Lazar further says, the world is worthy of being created even for just one righteous person. For it says, and Hashem saw the light and it was good. And Tov, good, means a righteous person. Shanamar imru tzadik kitov. Say about a righteous person that it is good. So you see that's Tov. Somebody forgets something, makes himself forget something from his learning. Gorim galus lamanav causes exile for his children. For it says, you forget the teaching of your God, and therefore shakach banecha, and make your children be forgotten. Gamani, I will also make your children be forgotten. Rabbi Abo Amar Meridinas Migdulase, that if he makes himself forget his teachings, that he loses his high stature. It says ki ata ada ki. Ki ata hadas ma'asta. You knowledge you have rejected or you feel repulsed by it. And therefore I also reject you from being a kohen to me, meaning from being having a leadership spot for me as well. All right, let's leave it at that. Tomorrow we'll see this idea that for every person that passes away, a righteous person like them comes to the world to continue the work that they did. All right. Coming up.